We'll also talk a little bit in here about shaping and free shaping as well, and I'll get into these and I'll define these terms. So when we're talking about our toolbox, the physical ways in which we manipulate dogs, puppies, luring, spatial pressure, those body language things and things like that. And then shaping is just a process whereby you take a behavior and you work in steps towards the finished behavior, right? You don't necessarily get the behavior you want right away, but you reward steps along the path to the behavior, right? So I might be trying to get my dog to sit, for instance, or lay down, let's say, and I can't get him to lay all the way down, so I take a piece of food and I lower it, and the dog kind of bows down a little bit. They didn't go all the way down, but they're part way down, and I might reward that a few times, right? And that's a step towards downing. And then I reward that a couple times, then I go a little lower, and reward that a couple times, and I go a little lower. And then eventually they're laying down, right? And I shaped that behavior in steps, and they call that successive approximation. Each step is successively closer to the next step, right? So that's shaping. Any behavior in which you can't get the finished product right away, and you reward steps along the path to the finished behavior. And there are different approaches to shaping, right? So one of the approaches is what we call assisted shaping. It means I'm trying to help the dog make the connection. Luring is a form of assisted shaping. That the process I just described is assisted shaping. I'm helping you start to go down, but you don't go all the way down, so I reward you part way, and then I reward you part way until I get you all the way down there, right? But I was assisting, I was helping you make those connections. There's another process that's very popular with reward-based trainers called free shaping. And free shaping is using a conditioned reinforcer, a marker, a clicker, a conditioned reward, and no input from the handler. And you just try to capture the dog doing behaviors that are headed towards the behavior you want, right? And this is super popular, right? So if I were going to try to teach my dog to go stick its nose in that basket over there, I could lure the dog over and drop something in the basket so they stuck their head in there. I assisted them in going to check out the basket. Or I could just set the basket down and wait until the dog headed in that direction. And the dog headed in that direction, and I went click or yes, and they got a reward, and then I waited again, and they wandered over there, and I went click or yes. And then pretty soon after every time they head that way, they get a reward, they start hanging out over there. They're like, rewards happen every time I'm over here. And then they get a little closer, and I raise my criteria a little bit at a time until eventually they're hanging around the basket, and they accidentally bump into it, and then once they touch it, they want me to touch it. They start hitting it with their foot or poking it with their nose. And eventually, if my timing is good and the dog's motivated for rewards, I could teach my dog to go stick its head in the basket without doing anything other than standing here and waiting for them to do it, right? And so that's very popular in certain reward-based training circles, because if you capture the behavior that way, there's no help to fade. If I lure the dog over there and I want them to do it, I gradually have to eliminate the luring. This is a process we call fading, right? I have to get rid of the help a little bit at a time, right? Until that help's all gone. And so people get stuck and they can't get rid of the help. And so as a result, there's this kind of idea that free shaping is better in certain circles because there's no help to fade once you captured it. We'll talk later about why I don't think that's the case, but anyway, there's some things around it. But know that free shaping is out there, and we'll talk about it a little bit in here. And the idea of shaping is something we'll talk about as well. And free shaping is one of the ways in which we can also create behavior, aside from our physical tools for manipulating behavior, luring, and spatial pressure. And with older dogs outside of puppyhood, also leash, we'll use the leash, right? We won't go into it in great detail in here. In here, we're going to talk about getting our puppies used to the equipment, but we're not really using the leash to create behavior with little puppies. That starts in adolescence, when we begin to incorporate the leash into our training. Up until that point, the leash is going to be like just to control some of the dog's behavior, to limit their options. We're not teaching them stuff with the leash, pulling them down and doing stuff like that, but I'm blocking your ability to run in the street while I'm teaching you to pay attention to me. I'm not letting you run around the room everywhere. I've got you on a leash, but it's really to sort of limit your options, not to actually create behavior in the beginning.